So this video is for the M2 discussion board response about the AOR model, Action, Observe, and Reflect. This example is from an experience I had as a teacher. I taught 2 pull-out special ed classes for English for 7th grade, and I taught them during 1st and 7th period. I had a class roommate of another teacher, and she taught math to those same groups of kids during 4th and 8th period. In the spring, we were doing our high-stakes state testing, and it was completely computer-based. So our special ed kids took the tests at a different time than the gen ed kids did because they had different accommodations. And so while I was able to teach my regular class, the gen ed kids were off testing. So I was using a classroom of the gen ed kids to teach my class because my class roommate, Mrs. R, had given herself another plan period for the day since the gen ed class that she was supposed to be helping in was off testing. So she'd already had a plan, but decided she needed another and proceeded to use it to sit in our classroom in the dark on her phone. So when the testing time for the gen ed classes was about to be over, I told my students to gather their stuff and go back across the hall to our normal classroom because this testing students would be coming back soon and need their classroom. My students went ahead of me and I continued to gather my things before I followed them. Before I had even made it out of the room, though, my students came back in saying, and this is the action, Mrs. R told us we had to come back over here because she's on her prep. And here's the observe. I was fuming. It was all I could do not to show it in front of the students at that moment and march them back across the hall myself to our classroom anyway. The next day at our team meeting, I vented to my other teachers on the team about the incident, and there had been so many other things to happen because of Mrs. R that year. She was just drama all the way through, and it just caused me stress, and it was kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back at this point. So I found myself very upset. I was near tears. The other teachers called in our principal, who had actually been my reading teacher in middle school, so she knows me pretty well, to hear me out. And as I sat there and described this experience to everyone, it was all I could do not to barge into the other team's meeting, Mrs. R's team, that was happening across the hall, and give her a piece of my mind right then. Mrs. G, it was our principal, and she's a good principal, but she does play everything really close to the vest, and it's really hard to tell what she really thinks. So she and my team of teachers, rather than end up regretting something that I said in anger, they told me that I should think about what I wanted to say, calm myself down, and that we would have a meeting, the 3 of us, me, her, and the principal, at the end of the week. But the meeting never happened. And I had known that it wouldn't, because I know myself. This is the reflect part. I knew then that if I didn't say what I was thinking right then, that with the same emotion that I felt in that moment, the situation would diffuse, and at the very least, I wouldn't be able to get my point across, and at the most, nothing would happen and nothing would be resolved. I understand now, as the bottom line for our school corporation was unfortunately saving money, preserving reputations, and keeping up appearances, that there was no meeting because if there had been a meeting, there would have been a risk of confrontation. If there was confrontation, there may have been a lawsuit, and there was no way they were letting that happen. And I find it really unfortunate that people are so scared of conflict that they won't stand up for others, even if it's the right thing to do. Question 2. As in the scenarios explained before, the personality of the principal and my personality did not work so well together to achieve the desired outcome. I wanted something done about Mrs. R and her selfish and phony tendencies, which had persisted for far too long, and Mrs. G did not want to ruffle feathers. She feared a lawsuit and a blemish on the reputation of the school corporation, and so, in being very professional, led me to believe that we would have a meeting to attempt to resolve the issue, but then did not take steps to make it happen. If I had been in her shoes, I would certainly have called a meeting between the involved individuals, especially if I had already said that I was going to do that. The problem did not disappear by just ignoring it. The anger lessened, but the damage was done and needed to be rectified in some way. Follow through is very important to me personally, and those who don't practice it, no matter how well their intentions, will lose respect from me. Thanks.